our goal in meeting with you today is to outline alignment rezoning and how it fits into the other work of the planning department. We also want to share some ways that you can remain in touch with us and be involved as the project advances in later months and into next year. The overall approach to engagement for this project has been to begin in this year by engaging neighborhood leaders. We wanted to use this time to meet with neighborhood representatives, introduce ourselves and the project, but also get a sense from them about the best way about how we can engage with neighborhoods. At this point about the process and how we can have meaningful engagement with the community through the fall of 2024 and beyond. You'll see a list of things here that are coming up in years to come. I just wanted to note, we expect that our initial recommendations and our draft maps will not be ready until 2025, 2026 at the earliest. But the important thing for you today is to know that there is plenty of time for you to review alignment rezoning recommendations, give insight, and directly impact the process for how we file these changes. So very quickly, I think we've hit on this before, but just as a rehasher, our presentation today is going to focus on discussion on the background of the project. We'll move into sort of unpacking the policy map as our primary guidance for alignment rezoning. And then we'll work to dig into alignment rezoning, why it's important, as well as any next steps and what it means for you. So with that, we have a poll. I'm going to launch the poll and you should see it pop up on your screen. It's pretty easy to navigate. If you are having issues with it, don't worry. It's not a critical component of the presentation today, but it is helpful for us to get an understanding about sort of where your knowledge level is with the key concepts and things that are going to be driving our work. So with that, I will launch the poll. And like I said earlier, for this poll, you'll have to answer the question and then click the next arrow at the bottom right-hand corner, and that will allow you to move through the 4 questions. And once those are all answered, just click submit, and then we will be good to go. So I will pause and let everybody work their way through the questions.
Looks like we have a few answers coming in.
Awesome. Yeah, I see 6.
And like Andrew said at the beginning, if you have any issues with the poll, if it's not accessible to you, it's okay.
All right. I'm going to close the poll. I think we have 20 people in the meeting, and I see 6 responses, but it's possible people are having issues. Totally fine if you're unable to do that. I will close the poll. Just real quick, it's good to see the results. Can you all see Mariah, can you guys see the results when you're in? Or do I have to share them?
I can see them.
Okay. If you can't, I'll read through it. What we're seeing here is folks are generally moderately familiar with the comprehensive plan. 71% of folks are moderately familiar with that. 43%, a little less familiarity with the UDO. 43% are moderately familiar. 29% are somewhat familiar. 14% are not familiar at all. Totally fair. It's a 600-page document, and it takes a lot to get familiar with that. So the zoning map, it looks like 43% are moderately familiar with that. 14% said they're extremely familiar with the zoning map. You are probably a rezoning agent or a planning commissioner. And how familiar are you with the policy map? 57% of folks said moderately familiar, with 14% being not familiar at all. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, that 14% will be familiar with the policy map. And if you are familiar, hopefully the presentation today will start to unpack some of the implications of the policy map and sort of how it's guiding our work in alignment rezoning. So thank you for participating in that. Um, to set the backdrop for all of our work, Charlotte's growing. We all know this. This isn't news to anyone, but where I wanted to start a presentation was on some of the specific issues we're facing as we grow and that we are trying to address through our policies and our rules. So, first and foremost, the cost of living is increasing in Mecklenburg County. You can see this chart from the Mecklenburg County Pulse Report, and it showed that for those working adults without any children, the biggest increase over the last 5 years has been housing. That's increased by over $4,000. For those with kids, the cost of childcare has increased on average by $11,000 since 2018. Significant cost increases causing pressure and just demands on different things in the city and in the county at large. We're not unique in that, but it is certainly, good to have your mind wrapped around sort of the extent of that issue. Development activity and pressure is at an all-time high. Charlotte's a desirable place to live, and we have a lot of people who are moving here. So our communities and the fabric of our city is always changing. This map here is from our Development Near Me application, and this app shows you all of the different development activities that are happening across the entire city. Every dot or block here represents some sort of rezoning, grading permit, or development activity across the entire city. I'd encourage you, if you want to try this tool out or to scan the QR code here, if you're interested at all in digging into more detail on the development activity in your neighborhood or in the city at large. So it's because of all these challenges and many more that we decided we needed a plan. The city will continue to grow, but the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan laid out a vision for how we wanted to grow. We heard from our community that we wanted to become a more equitable city for all. To further define how we're going to become a more equitable city, our comprehensive plan laid out 10 policy statements that were adopted by City Council as a part of the plan. I've highlighted 5 of these 10 because I think these are really important for our work, specifically as we look at changing and updating our city zoning map. We want 10-minute neighborhoods where we can walk and easily get to the services and goods that we need. We want our neighborhoods to be diverse and accessible, meaning we should have more housing choices and housing should be more affordable. And we also want development to be more oriented toward trails and transit routes, while also retaining our identity and charm. These are kind of our guideposts for development and growth as guided by the comprehensive plan. So once we had that comprehensive plan, the next step was to apply those policies to a map of Charlotte, and that would guide our future changes to our zoning map. In 2022, the city developed the 2040 policy map, which applies the goals and the vision of the comprehensive plan to each property in Charlotte. This map guides future changes to our zoning map so that over time, our zoning map can allow for development that lines up with our vision. The policy map has 10 place types that are assigned to each property in Charlotte. These place types guide the future of what properties will become as they're rezoned. So you can see the full spectrum of place types in this chart. We have place types for residential areas where we live in neighborhood 1 and neighborhood 2. We have place types for employment in industrial areas where we work and shop, and commercial, campus, and manufacturing and logistics place types. And we have place types even where we're calling for a mix of these things in our mixed use activity centers. These include innovation mixed use, neighborhood center, community activity center, and regional activity center place types. So once we adopted our comprehensive plan and a policy map, the next step in achieving the vision of the plan was to unify and update our development rules into a Unified Development Ordinance, or UDO. The work we did in 2022 to adopt the UDO was primarily driven to simplify and update the rules to be consistent with the vision and the policy in the 2040 plan. The main point here is that the UDO and the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan are designed to facilitate development that lines up with the community vision. The UDO, as some of you know, is our primary set of rules for new development in Charlotte. So to achieve the vision of the comprehensive plan, the UDO sets maximum building heights, for example, that respect community context. We have incentives in the UDO for affordable housing and sustainability. We allow duplexes and triplexes on any lot. And we require trees and screening to reduce impacts on neighborhoods. We require stormwater management to mitigate, sorry about that. We require trees and screening to reduce impacts, and stormwater management to mitigate environmental impacts of new development. To just sort of further demonstrate this alignment, this graphic shows the zoning districts listed out under the policy place types that guided the drafting of each of them. Each place type or each zoning district is guided by a place type. Sorry about that. The UDO maintains the rules for how development can happen. And so in this way, it's aligning the policy with the rules in the way that they were drafted. It's important to note here, though, that when the UDO was adopted and became effective on June 1st of last year, there was a direct change that occurred to update and translate our zoning districts from the old districts to the new. But this importantly didn't address any areas where the policy map did not line up with or were misaligned with the zoning. This change that occurred last year was just a translation from the old to the new that didn't consider the policy direction for the future necessarily. To better help you understand what we mean by misalignment, let's look at an example of an area in Charlotte. This is the Sugar Creek Road corridor near the intersection of Mallard Creek Road. What you see here is a picture of the areas that the 2040 policy map recommend become a neighborhood center. So what does that mean? This is what a neighborhood center place type envisions in its guidance. The question for you all, and this is an obvious question, is do these two images look like they align? Are they the same types of places? No, not exactly. And that's because the policy map guides for the future, and it recommends to the city and city council that as zoning changes in this area, it should allow more places that look like this. The reason the Sugar Creek corridor looks the way it does today is because that's what the zoning map has allowed. On June 1st, 2023, when the UDO became effective, the zoning in this corridor, as I said, just translated from B1 to commercial general or CG. This change was just a translation from the old to an updated zoning. And the commercial zoning in this corridor means that the property owners have been and will continue to be allowed to build to the rules that allow places like this. So how do we get from the Sugar Creek that we see today to the neighborhood center place type that our policy map envisions? Alignment rezoning is the effort that we will use to identify and make changes to zoning in these places. It will look at the entire zoning map and support better connections between the zoning and the policy map by suggesting changes to zoning in areas where our adopted policy is recommending something different than what it's zoned for today. This approach has a long list of benefits. It'll be a major effort for sure, but it'll be comprehensive and led by the city. So it won't target one area or another. It'll be applied across the entire city. By right development happens today, and it will continue to happen both here and everywhere. By right development is just development that happens that's in line with the entitled allowances based on our zoning map. So that happens everywhere, and it will continue to happen. But if we align zoning, this hopefully gets us to a place where development outcomes are better meeting community needs. And lastly, this project will better equip us as a city to put zoning in place and understand where capital projects are needed to meet that new entitled density or that entitled intensity. So taking this down to the ground here, applying these sort of implications to this area, making updates to our zoning map, it presents a lot of opportunities. If our comprehensive plan and policy map are working to achieve things like more housing supply, aligning zoning is going to allow new development to build to that and allow that much needed housing in these areas. If our plans and policy map want to shorten the distance from the places you live to the goods and services you need by creating 10-minute neighborhoods, updating zoning is going to allow development that may mean you don't have to get in your car to get to the grocery store. So with that, we'll move on to the project schedule one more time. Again, I wanted to come back to this project schedule to reiterate that there's plenty of time for you to review and give insight and directly impact the process for how we file these changes. This project will involve lots of community review and feedback, and we want you to stay involved into the fall and into 2025 and beyond as we get closer to having a map of recommendations to review. Today, we have a few ways for you to be involved. I think the first and best way is for you to visit cltgov.me/ARZ, and this will get you to the page where you can find all of our project resources, which includes the next two items that I'll talk about. If you've heard anything today that you'd like to talk more about in a one-on-one meeting, our staff or our project webpage has a section where you can connect with staff. If you click on that, it will open an application where it has our availability and you can select the time and we can have a phone call or a Teams meeting to just go over whatever your question might be. That it could be a site-specific question, it could be a process question, and kind of everything in between. We're open to it, and we did this sort of style of meeting with our neighborhood leaders in the spring. And I think I can speak for them as I can reflect on myself that it was a really helpful way to connect with folks, to quickly download information and really be able to answer whatever small question you may have to get you the information that you need pretty quickly. And lastly, subscribe for project updates. If you haven't done this already, this may be the best thing you can do today, is to sign up, because as we come out with new meetings and even eventually um, a map of recommendations, subscribing for project updates will make sure that you get a notification when we release those. So with that, we will pause for questions. I will say, I don't know if I saw any coming in the chat necessarily. I have not been monitoring the chat though, but if you need to jump off, wanted to say just thank you. Feel free to contact us. This is our contact information. Again, the project is very early, and we look forward to having an open dialogue all throughout the process. So feel free to reach out at your convenience. And again, thank you for coming today. But at that, I will pause to see if we have any other questions.
Nothing coming in through the chat yet, but feel free.
And you can also feel free to raise your hand if you have something you want to talk through. Right, Gerard. I'll allow your mic now, Gerard. I think you can unmute to ask your question.
Okay, thank you. I was trying to type my question into the chat, but for some reason it's grayed out. But my question was, I know that there's been some conversation about updating yeah, right word. And so I was wondering what's the timeline for that as well, as I know that I think y'all were going back and looking at incorporating more neighborhood activity centers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't reflect necessarily or respond to necessarily what the changes will be, but I do know that the community area planning process will have a series of meetings this fall. So the current the first window of review of the policy map, not the first, but the latest round of review closed in July or in June, and they're working through. I know internally there's a process of reviewing those comments that will then have another period of review in the fall as a part of that project. I think that the plan is to bring that up for review and adoption by council early in 2025. Don't have much more detail other than that, other than to say, the fall is going to be really important. If you want to get involved with the policy map, I would recommend you visit the comprehensive plan website. And if somebody can track that down, whether it's Yolanda or Mariah, somebody can find the comprehensive plan website. I think it's just good to check in there to see if there's opportunities for engagement on the policy map. But because you're right, it is going through uh, some more rounds of review.
Yeah, thank you.
I just put it in the chat. We have Javier with his hand raised, and then we've got two people in the chat. So go to Javier and then to Eric, and then to Eric Zaverl, and then to Eric Howard.
Thanks, Mariah. Hi, Andrew and Mariah. Hi, everyone. So These initiatives kind of come in piecemeal, and I'm just wondering what relationship are we had workshops last year kind of broken into if you were southwest outer, southwest, inner. Um, at that time, we were engaged to discuss three areas, at least in the southwest outer Charlotte Premium Outlet Mall. There was some misalignment or some concern there. Rivergate Shopping Center, there was some concerns there about. It sounds like the same effort that we're doing here. Can you explain, or at least help
Sure.
me understand any difference or nuance?
Yes, there is some key differences. So the workshops that were held in the fall of last year, or was it the
Mhm.
spring of this year? I think it was the fall of last year.
Fall of last year.
Um, yeah, those were held by the community area planning team as a part of the, as I just mentioned, it's actually part of those meetings, the community area planning refinement of the policy map. So um, those comments and those feedback directly impacted any changes or adjustments to the 2040 policy map. Now, as I said today, the policy map is our guide for the future of alignment rezoning. That's the next step. So as a policy map, the policy map may change from, let's say, there was an area that was recommended for industrial by the policy map, and there was some conversation with the community, and the community said, hey, we'd like this to be more of a mixed use center. So maybe that becomes a change to recommend that place to become a neighborhood center, right? That changes the policy map, but it doesn't change anything for the zoning. Our effort will actually go in and identify the zoning realities and recommend changes to the zoning based on that policy map. So it's our effort is referring back to the feedback that the community had and the community area planning process, but it's taking that next step of actually suggesting a change to the zoning as opposed to just suggesting a change to the place type. Does that make sense?
Well, let's take it just one step further then. So what happened last June? Last June, basically the policy types became the new categories of rezonings. So I guess that's where the confusion lies, right? Nothing's
Sure.
called R3 anymore. It's called N1A, so what what remains to be accomplished with this effort as opposed to what happened last year with
Yeah. So
rezon
the
with
yeah.
um, with zoning specifically.
Right. So rezonings are you are 100% right. Rezonings today, if you come in and you're a petitioner, you own a piece of property and you want to redevelop, but the zoning isn't exactly what you want, you would come in and petition city council to say, I want to change the zoning to a different zoning district.
Mhm.
That is the policy map is going to be the basis for staff support of that rezoning petition. It's really used as guidance for city council in making that decision. And so that is going to continue to exist. The policy map will always be that sort of guide for rezonings. What we will be doing in this effort, we are actually putting together a rezoning petition as a city. That's the difference, is that it is not led by a petitioner. It's not led by a developer who wants to build something. We are just examining the policy map and the zoning and proactively suggesting changes based on that policy map guidance in a sort of a batch format. We did this years ago in the alignment rezoning for the blue line, where we actually had areas that were recommended for changes to a TOD rezoning, right? And we as a city said we're going to change the zoning throughout this entire corridor, and it changed 1,300 parcels overnight from whatever they were to a TOD zoning. Similarly, this will look at changes in that same way, where we as a city will decide which ones we want to include in the recommended changes, submit that to city council for review, and adopt them as a batch, as opposed to the process today being site by site petitioner led.
And so that, I guess, falls back just to, well, why is it being led by entitlement services that would exist, that would be looking at the current status today versus long-range planning, because ultimately that's really what we're kind of driving at here, right?
I can take that question. So I think some of the confusion is coming from there's two maps that we're talking about. So there's the policy map that Andrew talked about that long range is driving, and that is the companion to the comprehensive plan. That's the visionary document that basically takes the comprehensive plan and essentially makes it a visual interpretation of that plan. And then there's the zoning map, which is the legally enforceable designations for each parcel. So the zoning designations translated to what you were mentioning, Javier.
Mhm.
Last June, they translated from the old R3, your example, to N1A by name. So what we are doing is looking at that zoning piece, using that visionary policy document as a guide. So that's the key difference, and that's why it's an entitlement, because we're talking about we're talking about the zoning map. Um, that's the final outcome of our project is an updated zoning map.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they're good questions. I appreciate it, and it's confusing, and um, I always appreciate your feedback and candor. So, if there are follow-up questions, you want to talk more, feel free to connect with us. Eric, any idea of Eric Zaverl, how many place types zoning districts you will be rezoning with the alignment process? Um, it's a good question. I don't know, Mariah, if you have like anecdotal numbers. We have looked at everything. Do you want to?
I can say that we anticipate that this will happen in a couple of different batches, and we anticipate that it will be sort of like those more work and play type places first. We won't really be looking at residential up front, and then conditionals will come later. I don't know if that answers exactly the question you're talking about, but it's not
It,
going to exactly be like every single parcel will be anticipating a change. It won't even be close to that.
right. So, and I'll just add to this, just by sheer number, there are over 300,000 parcels in Charlotte. It's a big city. There's a lot of properties out there. Most properties are aligned because most properties in Charlotte have neighborhood one zoning and neighborhood one place type. That's an aligned zoning that we wouldn't recommend changes to. So a significant number of properties are going to be pulled off of the consideration right away. I think what 25% of the city anecdotally or 20% of the city is conditionally zoned.
That's
So
right.
there's another 20% that's pulled off. So right now you're looking at like really 80% of the city that's not going to be considered for rezoning. So it's really talking about probably 20% of parcels across the entire city and mostly in our non-residential place types. So not to say that our project won't consider a change in a residential area. I would say it's always important to review the map and the recommendations and give us feedback. But we are really trying to focus in on those centers, areas of, neighborhood center, community activity center, and then also, commercial, industrial, all those things. If you're zoned for that or you have a place type for that, there's a likelihood that if the zoning is off or different from what the policy map recommends, it'll be recommended for a change as a part of the process. So hopefully that helps just give you an idea what we're looking at.
Yeah, I see the follow-up about looking at N1, especially because N1, D, E, and F are not very abundantly applied on the ground. That's definitely something that we're aware of and something that we'll be considering as this process goes along.
Yep. Eric Howard, will rezonings that don't align with the policy map or place type be scrutinized more than those that do align with those that do align? Maybe that's just repeat. So, will rezonings that don't align with the policy map or place type be scrutinized more than this? I think, I think what you're asking is if a rezoning petition comes in, well, maybe, I don't know. Eric, do you mind coming off of mute? I will, Eric Howard, I will allow you to unmute if you would like to. And then you can unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, I think you got the gist of the question. Just will the rezonings that don't align with the policy and place types maps be scrutinized more than those that do align with it? If that makes sense. And that's maybe outside the scope of your alignment project. But
When you say rezonings, do you mean petitioner-led rezonings that are coming in month to month to city council?
yes.
Yeah, that's a great question. As a legislative decision, it's a decision that city council can sort of they are advised by the policy map. They are not held to the policy map, as anybody that's involved with this process knows. If city council wants to make a change that is inconsistent with the policy map, they are the legislative decision maker and they can do that. I will say, though, that I think in theory, as we go through this process and we really start to wrestle with the place types and the zoning districts, and we identify the areas where there are misalignments and have a good conversation with the community about why we want to make a change or why we don't, the theory is that if city council engages in that conversation, there will be more of a sort of a comfort level with the policy map, and perhaps it could suggest that they'll be more inclined to follow that guidance. However, they're not required to do that by anything. They are the decision maker and can kind of make that decision how they want. So I don't know if that helps, but
Yeah, I
you
think
know,
that answers it. I mean, the policy map is intended ideally to help guide council on deciding on rezonings, right?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yes, thank you.
absolutely.
We've got Phil Gussman with his hand raised. Phil, I think you can come off mute.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. And also, I'll address Eric Howard's as a past planning commissioner. Yes, the answer is definitely yes. If the policy map doesn't line up, on the planning commission side at least, we certainly spend more time kind of reviewing, trying to look a little bit deeper, make sure we understand why the policy map historically our guidance maps were very unaligned with the prevailing zonings, so we had to do it constantly. But the new policy map is much more in line with what the city would like to see on the ground. But the answer is yes, we spend more time on it. My question was, I'm trying to tell if there's any part of the alignment rezonings that are going to be impacting the airport noise overlay as we have it from our city planning perspective, not the federal stuff and all that.
Are you referring to just the plans? Sorry, go ahead.
We have a anon place type or on the policy map, or I think it's what I shoot.
No,
is that right?
the overlay in the UDO.
Yeah, that's where.
So as the airport acquires property, it converts to the manufacturing and logistics place type, and then we follow that. We've been in contact with Stuart Hare from the airport a bit, and we work closely with them. So it's something that will definitely be a factor in any of our recommendations.
Okay, because it's the previous overlay extended well beyond the city owned or the airport owned property.
Yeah.
We have noise disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
I know sometimes when we're rezoning stuff, we take that into consideration and everything. I was just asking the question, is this going to impact either of those two types of overlay that we have?
I think that any overlay that exists today would continue to remain in place, even though the base zoning district may change. We would use both the ANDO, airport noise disclosure overlay, and the historic districts overlay, and any other overlays that are out there. and carry those over even where the base zoning district may be recommended for a change by alignment rezoning.
Okay. That's got it. That's the answer. I thought so. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't anything else going on there that I had missed. Thank you.
No. Yep.
Yeah, because those overlays function as an extra layer of protection, and we don't want to mess with those. They've been negotiated in different ways, so
Right. And some of our pedscapes
certainly.
kind of have been supplanted by the UDO anyway, so less of an issue and things like that. But I know those two that you just mentioned are obviously going to be on top of other zonings and things like that as well. All
Right.
right. Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Well, hearing no other questions, I want to just say thank you. It's been very helpful for us to have this back and forth. Again, like I said, visit cltgov.me/ARZ. Very fortunate that it rhymes. It's kind of fun to say. To sign up for project updates and sign up for a meeting time for us if you want to talk with us online. We'd be happy to do that. But in the meantime, just want to say thank you and hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. And with that, we will wrap up our meeting.